What Mr Cameron has said is that he wants to restrict the European Court of Human Rights to just deal with the essential cases, the real violation of human rights, and not get involved in 250,000 or however many cases it is of a minor nature. As usual with the Tory party in my country, this is window dressing to fool the voters. In actual fact, if the European Union accedes to the European Convention on Human Rights in its own right, which it intends to do, this will bind us even more tightly to it, because at the moment we could, as a country, repudiate and renounce the Convention and withdraw from it. If the EU signs on our behalf, and while we're members of the EU, then of course we're going to be bound by it, and bound by it more tightly. And of course the European Court of Human Rights is always trying to extend its area of competence and its influence in different areas of life. So in actual fact we're going to see it take much more control over our day-to-day life than it does already. And it's already chaotic in my country with their rulings and the idiotic judgments that they come up with. Now, I've had extensive correspondence with number 10 Downing Street on this and received replies, because what I've said to them some months ago now, last year, is that this accession has to be a unanimous decision in the Council. So all that Mr Cameron has got to do is say no. That's all he has to do, one word, no, and it won't happen. What they replied to me was, oh, we can't do that because, number one, the previous Labour government agreed to it, so we're bound to it. Number two, oh, it won't make any difference anyway, so don't worry about it. Now, I replied to them and said, well, first of all, under our constitution, a parliament and a government cannot bind a future parliament, so you're not obligated to say yes. Secondly, it will bind us more tightly, but if you're telling me it doesn't make any difference, then all the more reason to say no, because it doesn't make any difference then, does it, to our European partners? They won't be inconvenienced by it. And of course, at that point, they stop writing to me because they can't win the argument. My golden rule of politics is judge politicians and governments by what they do and not by what they say. Cameron talks about lessening the power of the European Court of Human Rights, but all he has to do that is to say no in a council meeting and stop the EU acceding. But he won't do that. And he won't do it because really they're in favour of this whole stuff, the whole project, further integration, and the European Court of Human Rights having more power and influence over our lives. That's going to be the consequence of him not saying no, and the rest of it is just hot air. The European Court of Human Rights has recently said that it's okay for us to deport Abu Qatada to Jordan and Abu Hamza to be extradited to the USA after many years of these people going backwards and forwards in the courts in our own country. And while I think most British people would welcome those decisions, I think that there's a political motive here, and I think the European Court of Human Rights is saying, well, we know that we're becoming increasingly unpopular in countries like Britain. If we say it's okay for them to send off these terrorist suspects that nobody has much sympathy for, it'll quieten down the argument about the use of the European arrest warrant and the one-sided extradition treaty with the USA, so that then they won't be able to complain about our own citizens being taken off without evidence against them. And the loss of their real human rights under our own law in the United Kingdom. So I think that's why they may have come to these decisions recently. The trouble with the European Court of Human Rights and the European Court of Justice is I don't believe that they are genuine law courts. They are political engines of the European Union, and their ultimate goal is always closer and deeper integration. Of course, what we're seeing now is a creation of a European system of criminal law in its own right, and they want to take control of that away from our own democratically elected governments and our independent courts. The law and the legal systems in individual nation states should take account of the views of their own people, and they shouldn't try to go too fast in front of them in what they think and believe. And what's happening is that we're now having things imposed upon us by legal decisions from Luxembourg and Strasbourg by these courts, which ordinary people don't agree with and don't want. But of course, as everything to do with the EU, the ruling elite thinks that these people are not clever enough to think for themselves, and that must be done for them, and they're getting increasingly out of touch with what ordinary people think. Development of kind of liberal values or whatever in countries are up to the people and the politicians in those countries. What's right in one country may not be right in another country. I don't imagine, for example, the European Court of Human Rights would have much luck trying to enforce gay marriage in Saudi Arabia, and it wouldn't try. So if people want that in Sweden and they don't want it in Holland or something, I don't know, that's up to those people through their political system and through their own courts and their own laws to decide. It's not up to a foreign court in Strasbourg or Luxembourg to decide for them.